Everybody doing? It is Friday night. You're at the Toy Armada live toy hang Friday broadcast. Still don't quite know what to call it. I'm Aaron Archer. I am a toy designer. Used to work at Hasbro Kenner for many years. Batman, Aliens, Transformers, G.I. Joe, all kinds of stuff. Alan G, Matt, Ninjatron, Coltron, Ben, how are ya? Been a pretty good week. Another week where I worked a lot. Did not get to draw much stuff for fun, but I did get to draw that Vector Prime, which was fun. Where is that guy? Can I just pop that up? No. Not without some serious resizing. Sorry. I thought I could pop that up there like a fool. So I thought I would talk a little bit about creating characters today and some of the thought processes that went into that. We talk about, Armada and some of the other things in the Unicron trilogy particularly, but even in the movie and the video games, whether it was creating characters out of full, from nothing, or kind of realigning characters that maybe didn't have a purpose from G1 or in the modern sense of the place of the brand didn't have a place. So I'm going to cover a couple different ways that characters get created and manipulated. Sorry, I'm looking around. I can't seem to get my chat in the right place. Anyway. Maybe that's what it is. There we go. So I hope you all had a good week. Hope you're ready to hear some tales from back in the day. How you doing, David? Alan? Samkiat? Did I say that right? Archie? Arch? How's everybody doing? So obviously in the picture I had Vector Prime. We can start with Vector Prime. The beautiful thing about Transformers is that it has a need for or can incorporate a lot of different characters. So it's not a problem in that franchise to create characters for need. G.I. Joe is similar, although you need a little bit more of a practical reason, obviously. You don't have characters like Vector Prime that are kind of semi-godlike with, powers to cut into time and space and time travel and everything else. Multiverse travel was really what he was created for. He was initially created as a character that could cut through the multiverse with his sword and potentially bring characters from different versions of the franchise together. Now that changed a little bit in the execution of Cybertron and how that finished up, but initially he would have been a character that would have helped the Autobots or guided somehow them getting to the different places and meeting up with different versions of different characters that maybe they would have brought forward. That's a topic I could get into more at a different time. So Vector Prime becomes a character that it's not necessarily about his alt mode. It's not entirely about his backstory. It's a combination of all of that and presentation and then epicness within the story that then you can get away with a weird spaceship and like all this, a character that looks very different because he represents a whole cosmic storyline. And that's really the crux of it. What is the role, anytime you're creating a new character, for the toy line particularly, what's the role that this character can do that theoretically no other character in the lore can do? While it's nice that Transformers can absorb new characters because it's a planet of robots, millions of years, you can imagine there's robots all over the place. You do want to kind of keep it to where you can, at least it makes sense in a story. Oh, this is the time travel keeper. Oh, okay. That makes sense. It could have easily been perhaps a character like we could have absorbed part of Alpha Trion, the character, into that. But what I did with Vector Prime particularly was there was a mystery there about the 13 and what kind of the other 13 that hadn't been really written about, whether through Simon or the old lore. And I wanted to figure that out. So Vector Prime was a character that could come in and start to fill that space out. So Vector Prime, as an example, was totally created to propel the story in a new way, give a character the superhero ability or semi-godlike ability to do something no other Transformer can do, which then gives you permission to create a visual that is as unique and wacky to demonstrate how unique that character is. If Vector Prime looked exactly like he did in robot mode, but he was a fire truck, it wouldn't have the same impact. And if I said to you, oh, he's the time traveler, well, why is he a fire truck? There are subtle beats in there that are going to make that character sing. So if he is a master of time and space, if you look at all that detail, it's all very watch-like, very much like Gears and old-fashioned Transformer and antiquity, which gives him the loftiness of, oh, he's one of the 13. Oh, he's really old. It's all mental. I don't want to say tricks, but levers to kind of denote the type of character that guy is. Now, I just caught that out of the corner of my eye, David. Now, if he was a DeLorean, that I think also could make sense, although, other issues there. But that would be shorthand for, oh, this guy is a time traveler. If he was a DeLorean, absolutely. It would be expected, right? So that's the same kind of shorthand we would have created with. Hey, Claudio, Larry, David, cool. How are you guys doing? Rodimus Power. You told me at one BotCon that telling Vector Prime's full story would have taken most of Cybertron cartoons, something like that. Yeah, which is kind of true. I mean, if you, I have it in the back here. The book, the Covenant book, that explains kind of what happened in the early days of the 13 and Cybertron and Unicron and all of that. We knew we were going to tell that bigger story. So I got some funny things here related to that. So let me see. I appreciate that Alpha Trion and Vector Prime are different. They have different purposes. Yeah, that's totally true. And when we were creating that, those were the types of things that I had to navigate. Whether or not to create a new character or any of that. So to that end, I don't know if I have any more Vector Prime specific stories. But I found some of my early development stuff for what became the 13. and how I arrived at a few of the images and whatnot. So this is the first. This was in an old sketchbook. Kind of covers, at least initially, what I envisioned as the 13 and why. Really, we were trying to create a representation of each of the classic Transformer forms. So as I was creating the 13, some had been figured out, right? So Megatronus, I think, Liege Maximo, Alpha Trion, I believe, were already named characters. But then I tried to figure out how to bring the concept of beasts and combiners and different elements into the concept, so that the minicons, so that you had the whole pantheon of gods, different shapes and sizes and whatnot. Let me see. Sorry, didn't go through this in the same way, but so I went through and I drew kind of visions of what they could be. So this is not trying to figure the character out, but get the vibe of what the character was about. Other talented people would come in behind me and do that. So there's like the idea that why did the Quintessons think that they might have made the Transformers? Well, they come from the guy that was like the Johnny Appleseed, or the character that seeded some of the planets, so they were confused, try to shore up some of these ideas for the aligned continuity, right? Here's an elemental kind of concept. Gears and metal and magnetism, kind of a proto-transformer kind of weird thing. Just trying to create characters that made sense. Some of the ways that we told the story, that there was a good guy, a bad guy, they got locked in a planet, separated, created this 13. So you use these just to communicate as easy as possible. Some of this stuff doesn't need to be shown. So that's some examples of like creating the 13 that then get handed over to other talented artists. There's another weird version of Megatronus. How big he is compared to like what Megatron would have been. Pretty cool. But it all started here, and again, I talk about silhouette a lot, and that's a perfect example. These are all about the silhouettes to kind of figure out the different types. So I said a lot there. So creating characters for purpose is easy. So Vector Prime is easy in a way. If there's a need, then it's really easy to kind of go, oh, here's the idea, here's what that character is all about, and it makes sense, and no problem. Kind of easy to bring in a time traveler. A little trickier to maybe update a character that people already like. So no, I didn't come up with Liege Maximo. That was one that existed in the comics, one of the few that existed in the comics. So another way that's a little tougher is to reinvent a character that everybody kind of knows and likes. So I found something really unique here. but a Cheetor, right? So this would have been Beast Machines kind of era Cheetor. What probably would have become the big super scaled version of the product. But, you know, how do you keep upping the ante on a cool cheetah, right? There's only so many ways to push and pull that form before it gets a little awkward. And, you know, here's how that came out in robot mode. And I remember that tail head was kind of weird, right? So those are Takara version of images. So what you want to do when we would have characters like that, and we did it a lot with Optimus Starscream. Again, in my era, the Unicron trilogy, we could really push and pull the iconic elements of any given character. So that could either be form, color, name certainly pushed an agenda. And then whatever we needed to do to kind of either update or make in new, that was fine. So if you look at like Cybertron, Megatron, you know, that he's a big kind of Batmobile looking race car looking thing, and or jet, depending on how you want to approach it. But we weren't stuck with tank, you know, big red truck. We were really trying to enable to take the essence of these characters and kind of roll with it, push it forward. A little tougher on the animals because the animal forms are kind of locked. Whereas Optimus, he's a big red truck, but then you could also make him a fire truck, a big rig truck, kind of a space shuttle kind of option. You know, as long as it's a big industrial kind of truck or vehicle, I think those are acceptable. So a lot of what Armada was taking the essence of what was G1, so Starscream, a jet, and playing with it. So, okay, I'll put the nose down the front so the cockpit is kind of in that chest zone. Head shape will be almost exact. You know, some of the cone engine intake around the head will be there. Some of the color cues, but not worried about other things. Whereas Hotshot, you know, kind of inspired, I guess, by Bumblebee back in the day, but taking almost no essence from the transformation or look at all, right? So sometimes when you're creating new characters, you want to stay away from old characters for that specific purpose. So it's always important in a lineup of a team, you know, to have that younger character, usually a brighter color, right? Red or orange or yellow. Yeah, look who decided to come in. And, you know, so a little more hopeful and youthful, but maybe I didn't have to use the little horn heads and things like that. How you doing, buddy? So there is a bit of tropes that go on in that kind of thing. So let me think here. So then there's characters that I created from scratch, I guess. So Armada Jetfire. So that was the transformation we ended up going with. Could have been that. It was not that. One idea for the mini-cons was to keep the cargo area intact. So This is why I would have given these kind of silhouette shapes, is to make sure we had a heroic silhouette. And then this is, I don't know who that dude is. So this is how I used to work. I would just have these big engineering, used to go into the engineering plotters, this paper, and I would just draw on the big paper that way. I don't know. Some of this stuff's been seen, I guess. This is Jetfire in Armada was very much inspired, ironically, from the Armageddon space shuttles. I had that around. I have the Art of Armageddon somewhere here. Might be in the other room. But yeah, very much inspired by the space shuttle from Armageddon. We just didn't make it blue, but the extra wings and stabilizers and engines on top of a normal kind of NASA space shuttle was kind of what I was going for. Yeah, Sparkplug is absolutely Bumblebeesy. So, I started playing little games like that, or Takara did, where we would put those things in. Little confusing if you knew the old lore, but again, trying to keep those shapes and those different elements that people did remember and like. So as we rebuilt the thing, we slowly realized elements that we should keep. Excuse me. So and here's another, this whole thing, this whole endeavor, taking all the characters that we know and love and showing them in their early days Cybertronian forms, was a really big deal. And High Moon did a great job of executing all of that. So I don't know what else to say there, but this was a good example of taking the characters that we all know and really pumping it out. Go all day not talking, and all of a sudden I'm talking a lot. Sorry about that. So here's some of the examples of those video game products that we made. It gives you an example of using the core colors, some of the core shapes, trying to put elements in places like Optimus with his chest windows, unfortunately, even though my Armada Optimus doesn't have it, but elements that are going to be understood and repeated across all character designs, no matter what the format, really. So even in animated, Megatron is gray and he's a big military thing with a big gun on one arm. There are things that you're going to want to carry through with characters, and that's how you maintain the lore. I definitely feel like there are parts of Energon and Cybertron where we applied some of the character names from Armada onto future versions of things, like Red Alert. He came back all right. Hotshot got progressively odder. Wasn't probably staying true to the original character of that. Sometimes we created characters for kind of targeted roles. So I talk about Ransack and Bulk. Is it Bulkhead in Ransack? And Cybertron, the motorcycle and the big race car from the Speed Planet. Those were purposely made to be kind of buddies with a quirky relationship from the get-go. we wanted to pair those two up, and that's how we made sense of the two price points, and coming from the same planet, and they would be friends, and have this Lenny and George of Mice and Men kind of Crumple Zone, Ransack and Crumple Zone, have this kind of relationship. So those characters were kind of built like that, with the bigger, kind of monster guy and the little guy with the cap, almost like, hey, let me tell you something. So when we would create characters that could be subtle like that. And if you never saw the show, you're never going to pick up on that. But that's the stuff that would be infused into some of the designs when we're creating new characters. Because you can't always just put a generic, G1 helmet head on a thing and give it a name. I guess that could work. But if you could infuse any of it with some special, why does that guy have that weird arm or one eye, or the name matches up with the look of the character. So when we think of creating a character like a Lockdown in animated that ultimately ends up in the movie, taking a name and an idea, we didn't have an assassin or a bounty hunter character that we could really play up from G1. So Eric and Derek created that character, and everything about him is like, he looks like he's got a skull for a head. He's got the hook hand. He looks dangerous. His car has spikes on it, and looks like it would have barbed wire and stuff hanging off of it. So that's a character that's purposely made to be a role that didn't exist, which is that bounty hunter sniper kind of role. And then you can then go to like Michael Bay and go, oh, we got a bounty hunter character, and show him that, and he's like, oh, that's really cool. I'll turn him into a big gun, and that is a way to carry through a whole theme, and because again, if you could just put a buckethead type G1 head on it, that's fine, but giving it a skull head and a hook hand, and all of a sudden you really have something that might be more memorable, might be more usable, can leverage in a story better. And that's what we're also talking. It's really giving you a whole host of characters that you can understand. That's a full world, and that's another reason and an advantage to creating new characters. G.I. Joe falls under this as well, where if you needed a special character to come in to do halo jumps, you could create that character, or accentuate a parachuter that already exists. And in different services, you could custom make characters with the story purpose, which is really cool for G.I. Joe. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah, Oil Slick was another character that was created for animated. Kind of a wrecker type dude, but his name conveys a really funky look. So there's Lockdown. That's a great design on how to, create a purpose-built Transformer. Versus, reimagining for purpose. If it's not, if Soundwave can't be a tape machine because that doesn't make sense in the scale or getting around town kind of storylines that you're wanting, how do we reinvent a character to be more of a tuner car with a stereo system bumping through the city? And then all of a sudden he can deploy, his guys on the road, and that's more usable. So reinventing a character that way. All right, we're at the 10:30 mark. What do we got? You're watching the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer. Thank you for being here. Hope my rambling on creating characters is making some sense. Has anybody got any questions here? Transfan 1988. Did I confuse something? Yeah, we didn't have the rights to Death Head, that's for sure. So I guess that he represents a little bit of that, doesn't he? Dark Crumple Zone as Super Lenny. Huh. That's funny. Yeah, so that's how we referred to them, Lenny and George, which is a way to communicate if there's characters from other media that can shorthand a conversation. Then that's what we did. So that's funny that's what Super Lenny was referring to. Although, yeah. Was there any in-lore explanation as to why Red Alert had missing hand in the Unicron trilogy? I remember Cybercode Key said it was cut off by Starscream, but I don't think that was ever referenced. I don't really know. Totally made up for a play feature why the hand, I guess, got cut off. I just saw it as a surgical hand. If that was the medic, that how his tools manifested themselves were out of one of the arms. Never really thought of it, good or bad, that it was cut off per se, although that's interesting. And if the cyber key code said it, then it must be canon. So that is all I can recall about that. I know that this is off topic, but how come the plastic on Armada figures, especially Megatron, Galvatron, is so creaky? Always wondered as a kid. It's a little stiffer. There might be more rubbing because everything's a little more robust, and that creates that squeak. But other than that, I don't really know. It is more robust plastic. It's older plastic. It just means it's thicker, so it's got more oomph behind it. But I can't speculate beyond that. I love Transformers that transform into muscle cars like Lockdown and Prime Cliff Jumper. Yeah, there were a few throughout the Downshift and a few others throughout the era. We always had to be careful not to follow any particular muscle car, but they work out pretty well from time to time. But the nature of a muscle car, you automatically have either a tough character, a fast, mysterious character. Think of Speed Racer's brother. Or a cocky character, a young Hot Rod type character. So that form kind of denotes a couple certain type of characters. And if you already have that role filled, there wasn't need for more of that. Lugnut and Lockdown were outstanding designs. Man. And the Gunship Megatron. Yep. Those were fun. Those were really good silhouettes and forms. Lugnut kind of became a similar type character. If you think about it, to Crumple Zone. Was there a policy in Hasbro to define the storytelling in-house instead of making deals with other companies like in the 80s? Yeah, it became, particularly when we were going to do it with Takara, we were going to do it in-house because of the communication back and forth and everything. But what often happens is if you just go and write a Transformer story, That's great. You can make a great cartoon out of that. I think Prime represents this a little bit. But if you don't infuse it with some of those key beats that activate the kid's mind, owning the playground, it's not just toys, but it's video games and some of the what makes this unique kind of stuff, whether it's calling out mini-cons or find the Energon or any of that kind of stuff. So having the storytelling in-house ensured that as we were creating, we were kind of building the building blocks for what a final story could be, versus throwing it all over the wall and having a writer try to make sense of all of that, which would be incredibly difficult and wouldn't be in the right time frames. But it's also a way to ensure for a while that the play patterns were kind of infused into the overall story of the show. And that's important to a toy company, because when it's not there, so like in Prime, you just have Transformers. Here's another cool Transformer, and there's nothing else to incentivize you buying another one or collecting more or getting into a wider play pattern with any of it, because that call to action isn't there. And then there's a disconnect because the toys need a little bit more than just cool storytelling. So that's why we like to keep it in-house for a while. It worked like that, and now it doesn't work like that. And I think it's difficult for the toy team to follow, because Transformers are so unique that you can leverage that uniqueness or be kind of cuffed by it, and it really depends on the partners and some of those things. What were some of the things you wanted to do with Vector Prime that just didn't materialize? I don't know. Pretty much made it as we wanted to make it, kind of a complex, weird spaceship influenced by Swiss watches and stuff. Got that big sword in there. I always like a big sword. So I don't think I had anything other than, I wish some more of the line continuity stuff would have gotten out there. But I'm happy that the book, the Covenant book, did get out. Tells the story a little bit. Was the 2006 classic line envisioned as taking up directly from the end of G1? It has some interesting design, deco continuity with the Action Master version of Prime, Megatron, and Bumblebee, etc. No, we wouldn't have been that referential to what had become before, other than to say, if you're reinventing core iconic characters that people might not remember 100%, that you can take the essence of that. So Bumblebee is easy. While it wasn't a VW bug, it was certainly a small-sized, European-ish, roundish, yellow vehicle. Megatron, we were able to get back to being a gun or a blaster. When I'll take a half step back, when we were designing that classics line initially, it was to rekindle the fire for any, let's call it at that time 34-year-old dormant fan that hadn't paid any attention since G1, might have kids, and would see some things in the toy aisle that triggered their childhood memories. So big red truck, in the vernacular, a little bit more of G1, Megatron being a weapon, a yellow round car, a jet, things that very much would call back that nostalgia and go, oh yeah, this isn't quite like the one I had, but this is a cool toy, let me get it for you. So really, that's what the classics line was about. And if we're leveraging those character traits that are the essence of those characters, colors and shapes and modes and things, the location of details, We must have just done a decent job of that, I guess, if it recalls other versions. The goal was to carry that through. So how would you personally design a toy that changes silhouettes between modes, like Transformers Prime Cliff Jumper, sleek angular car to buff rounded bot? Yeah, there's different toy techniques, where depending on how you can articulate or put the shoulders or the hips or the head, you can make a creepy or regal bot depending on how that goes. A lot of mine, I like to move the wings and things around. That was a big way I did it. So I don't, other than that, sometimes it is tough because sometimes the characters don't always fit their vehicle types anymore. I don't have a good example of that at the moment, but where you want to get some of the attitude that the character is now imbued with over the years of animation and whatnot, but the form isn't the best for that. Ransack and Crumple Zone are basically the one-for-one replacement of Demolisher and Cyclonus after they carry the comic relief for the two previous shows. Yeah, totally are. We probably in our minds thought that we were replacing those roles even. Yeah. So Racer X is really Rex Racer. Yeah, totally. So we pull that kind of stuff in. I don't know. I don't know always how successful we were with it, but those are the thought processes. I remember the Trans-Tech Starscream was visually designed after the previous Starscream toy from Machine Wars. Yeah. Oh, with the thrusters and stuff, yeah. Some of that would happen, some of that design consistency. I put the horns on the Red Dragon, the horns on Armada Optimus. Energon design goes more towards a Galvatron helmet. Go back to more horns on Cybertron, Megatron. So like my Megatrons, I really pushed for horns for whatever reason. So some designers would certainly have design continuity within certain characters if they were fortunate to work on those characters multiple times. I know that's what I did with Megatron. Do you have any advice on creating characters and lore, like things you should nail down right away? Here's another thing. I was never a writer, so I'm a planner of franchises. So when I say creating characters and lore, it's all tactical. So if it's with the toy line you're already making and you got price points and different things, you're infusing then the story with why are these things different sizes and price points. There's story reasons why that's happening. If it's creating from a further out view, I tend to like stories. Again, this is all for toy development. Obviously character driven, where you have multitude of characters and have to create and or make sense of all of that. G.I. Joe, Transformer type brands. So really what it is you're trying to do. So I like to nail down that play pattern or what makes this series unique, and then lean into that. Is it the shapes? Is it the combining? Is it having a little friend? Is it all have a secret weapon mode? What is it that's inherent in the products that then are going to be the story kind of drivers that you can play with? So things like that I'd like to nail down right away. So if you know the play pattern, how how can you tell stories around that play pattern, would be the types of things a toy creator would want to nail down within a story. It's not necessarily, this is Bob, and Bob's dream is to do this, and his this and that, and that's a story Bible. That's character development. That's not entirely wasn't my role. My role would have been to, like, here's Lockdown. He's our bounty hunter. He is ultimately evil. He's a Decepticon, but he could work with anybody. ... Here's his visual, or here's the types of visuals we think he'd be represented by, a mood board kind of thing. Go, so give enough input to get the ball rolling, but try not to get into, because it's unneeded, actual writing of anything, if that makes sense. Did you design the Energon Demolisher? I think so. Isn't that just a redeco? Or are you talking the dump truck? I had a lot to do with the dump truck, but Eric did the final design of the dump truck. But I like that one. I like his feature. I like that over the head thing, if that's what we're talking about. Takara designer Alex said he was short on time when doing Classics Bumblebee, so he gave the sculptor a Don Figueroa drawing of Bumblebee's head for reference, which is why he had that chin. Yeah, we definitely would have had some of that. Man, I know Alex. He had plenty of time to design that thing, but he was a noodler, so maybe he wanted more time. Hello, Proto. How are ya? Have you ever seen Manchester play over there in England, sir? I did. Back in the treble year, at home in a FA Cup game against Everton, where Solskjaer scored 3. It was glorious. But that was the only time. Yeah, create the broad strokes, let someone else figure it out. And that's kind of how it is. You have to protect the overall toy concept and enterprise, but you're not trying to make a commercial, and you're not a writer, and you're not a, responsible for that, honestly. I wasn't to, make a cartoon. I needed to give the tools to the people we were partnered with to execute the plan as we needed it done. So, didn't need them creating their versions of what they think these characters needed to be, or do that heavy lifting of research and going back in time and finding the right or wrong stuff on the internet. We wanted to give them the direction that mattered most, about these characters and what we will or wouldn't, explore. There were some, I remember pitching the team that did Prime as before the Bible was created. There's fertile ground with these types of characters, we unexplored, and that kind of thing. So you could always find angles in there. Yeah, the lovely dulcet tones of Aaron Archer here on the Toy Armada broadcast. Like and subscribe, please. Do all that good stuff. Check out my website, archermonster.com. I sell art and sketchbooks. I have the dummy copy of the new color sketchbook done. Making couple little adjustments. But I will have that debuting soon, the cover of that. So look for that. Couple more questions here for the night. Friday night flies by. So yeah, Matt. So that's why we would let other people then figure it out. Or, different disciplines have different needs, right? So let them do their heavy lifting. Yeah, that dump truck design is fun on on that character. I like that he hunches over and kind of fires like a Pokemon character or something, Outcast. I was asking from a writing point of view, but that's interesting from the toy side. Yeah, there's this delicate balance over there, always was, and I kind of navigated it well, and that's why I kind of succeeded the way I did. But it's very hard for some people not to want to make it a commercial. Push the toy. Hey, this toy jumps. Make sure it jumps. And that's not any fun. Those cartoons really don't. They don't vibe very well. So what we were always trying to do is give the essence and let cartoon people do what they do, almost make the toy look cooler. But toy writing is a particular way of writing because you are pushing kind of a whole vibe, a whole franchise, as well as individual play patterns or themes. Batman Crime Squad, Batman this, Batman that. And so it's a weird balance to not be in that weird zone where you're really just selling to kids. All these stories should have the essence of good storylines, character development in some regards, and things happen and cause and effect and all that. And if there's products you can buy of those cool characters, then that's great. But if it's, hey, we got cool character number 1, go get him. Hey, we have cool character number 2, go get him. It would fall flat faster than you would think. So it's another way to guard against some of that. Armada was making the original team of Decepticons, futuristic vehicles, and Autobots, Earth vehicles, part of the storytelling concept. A little bit. We were definitely wanted to avoid getting too close to realistic vehicles. So in terms of military vehicles, we also didn't want to be warmongering. So we didn't want to do Earth-based real jets or tanks, or missile launcher kind of things, or helicopters. They're kind of quasi-inspired, but they have their own worldview, right? Through my lens, I suppose, where it wasn't going to get to, normal cars versus the army. Because that gets in a weird spot, too, where, all that can mean different things to different people, and you don't want to present anything good or bad that's going to frustrate people. So, not taking anybody's grandfather's something and turning it into a Decepticon and all that kind of jazz. When will the next podcast episode be? So I will debut that here. We recorded one this week. I'll let us decide when we're going to talk about what it is, but it is Transformers. And I don't know, we talked for a good hour about some little tidbits that people probably wouldn't know, and how some of this got created. So that'll be coming. Thanks for the Trans Tech episode, love. Yeah, we're gonna probably have to knock out a few of these before too long. We've kind of went into live mode and ice storms and spring breaks and everything else. So we'll get back on it one way or the other. And I think we'll both be at TFCon Toronto. So that'll be fun again to meet up with everybody and hang out with Proto Man live. We'll see if we do live that weekend. I know I can't. I have trouble with my phone and whatnot in Canada to do that kind of stuff. So maybe I'll hang with Proto. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Was there anything from your Transformers Supercross concept you wish made it into later lines, like Unicron influence mutations across the board or fully Unicron aligned empowered Decepticons? MCRG2K. So I'll take a half step back. We'll talk about this in a bigger matter at some point, but tonight, Supercross. So if Cybertron is going to different planets, the Beast Planet, the Speed Planet, the Giant Planet, just think of those as different multiverses. So the Beast Wars planet, the G1 planet, the something else planet, and we were going to pull Cheetor and Jazz and this and that from the different multiverses, and I think Unicron was polluting all the multiverses, and that's why Vector Prime had to build the team. It was very much in that same concept of Yamato, Battleship Yamato. There's a danger. We got a certain amount of time to fix this danger. We got to go do this crazy thing in order to find the stuff that's going to stop the thing that's going to get us out of danger. It was that kind of storyline, right? So the Decepticons would have been pulled into Unicron's orbit somehow. So I don't know. To me, the Supercross concept was pulling that super team together. A super crossover, if you will. And it just wasn't meant to be. I think the powers that be thought it was, we were kind of into our own stash a little bit, like kind of a little too nerdy, a little too referential to stuff that happened a long time before that. It would have been tough sell to go, oh, there's G1 fans out there that are going to remember Jazz. That is true, but when they're talking the kid market and everything, it's like, are you going to expect kids to go back and watch old shows? And at that time before the internet in the way it is now, that would have been difficult to ask, like, who's this Cheetor guy? So it was a little too heady for management. So we just backed off of that and got more thematic about the type of Transformer and seeding these different planets. So, hey, Matt with the super chat. Landmine. Energon Landmine, yeah, Orange Construction had smokescreen crane and characterized as the Thing. Yeah, that is kind of how we started thinking of that character, a little bit like the Thing. Both smokescreen and Landmine. I love that Landmine with the little multi-combiner thing. I like that. I like both those characters a lot. Probably some of my favorite Transformers from the Unicron trilogy, and Eric did both of them. The helicopter with the Ed 209 kind of gun station and the construction crane gun station, both really cool items. We started thinking of those guys in terms of Marvel characters around that time into the animated era. As a shorthand for people to get what we were building towards. So I remember the Thing being certainly a character type we wanted to replicate, this kind of big, squat orange thing. So yeah, that definitely came out of that. The Ice Storm episode was fun. Yeah, it was. Into our own stash. Yeah, sorry. Sounds more like Supercross was just ahead of its time. Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, absolutely. I have the document next door. Again, it's one of these big pieces of paper where I mapped it all out. And I'll dig that out. Maybe for next week we'll talk a little Supercross. Maybe record it a little differently to make it a little bit more of a short or something. But yeah, Supercross probably was ahead of its time. I don't tend to think like that. It's just that we pitch a lot of things. Things work at the time they work or they don't. There's plenty of cool stuff that didn't happen. There's probably plenty of stuff that shouldn't have happened that did, but you just keep grinding it out day after day, week after week, and you don't think about it. But from a look back view, yeah, Supercross kind of is a legacy line concept today, where all that stuff's pulling into one. You could also say that I helped contribute to building more and more animated and movie and different things and Unicron trilogy, that now that Supercross concept can breathe even bigger in a way. I'll take the high road there. So that's all really cool. Yeah, some of Ninjatron, some of those orange characters could have been reprised. We were always, like I just said, we were always making new characters and grinding them through and looking at the color variety at the different price points and roles, right? Tough guy or sleek guy or a fighter or a brain or a helper, a fast mover. You take all these things into consideration, and you don't always have the time to really nuance it. Some of those characters could have had the same name. Smokescreen could have kept going. You're absolutely right into some of that. And that's the stuff I look back on, and I wish some of that connective tissue could have been a little better. So Landmine, I don't believe, was a Smokescreen upgrade, although, we could make that call today and kind of all start saying that it was, because it essentially has that essence. Eric developed those items, so I wonder what his headcanon was as those were being developed, if he thought anything about Smokescreen, or if maybe I'm misremembering. Really, those two items are really some of my favorite items. I wish I had examples of those. I do not. For a long time I did, but those are really cool. Almost armor, triple changer, emplacement, battle emplacement transformers that are just really unique. Really unique. So Supercross, the concept of Supercross really turned into Cybertron. And I would say Universe was a baby step into a Supercross presentation. Hey, Mike and Louie, how you doing? So we are all good here tonight. We've done a pretty good job of talking over creation and why characters get created beyond just the toys. So that's been fun and interesting. Got to see a few examples of characters early, so if you're just getting here, go check out the early part of the broadcast where we talked a little bit about Armada Jetfire. Yeah, Armada Smokescreen's not a bad toy. It's only in the concept to me, from being internal with it, that I wish it could have been a little bit more of what I wanted it to be, or could have been, not what I wanted it to be, but what we had initially designed. So I look at it kind of like it's my failing, but to the outside world, what you got is still pretty cool and interesting. Wish he had a little more color on him. But, so don't let my internal view make anybody feel a certain way. My whole camera was down a little bit there. Sorry, folks. When you create characters, what is some of your conceptual process? What do you do to generate names to avoid registered trademarks? So that's a good question. You put your best foot forward. So if you're creating, a scary, creepy robot, and you want to, have those silhouette forms, those shape theories, to convey creepy. So I often would start with silhouette. I talk about that a lot. As far as names go, you put your best foot forward with the name on the board or in the presentation or in the document, and you worry about what will clear later. And if it's a particular name, because this guy is scary and, like let's go with a lockdown, he represents something particular, his role in the show, and you get a list back from legal for, I don't know, hauler, any just generic Transformer names, but they don't convey that character's essence until you get to lockdown. Oh, lockdown. Yeah, he locks down the field. He locks down the people. Yeah, okay, lockdown. That's aggressive. Yeah, that's good villain name. Awesome. So you'll get into the names a little bit at the beginning to sell it in and kind of get the people into the attitude that you're trying to say this character is, if you have that. And then towards the end, when you're actually in it, and it's really the marketing team that's in it, and whether or not a designer's involved is different in every case. But they're gonna hopefully get a name that can be cleared, obviously, that conveys that same thing, even if it's not the pitch name or the working title. And really, that's sometimes you just get stuck, whether it's names you have to use because you own them and you want to use them or lose them, or it's just we're out of time and we got this list of 3. You got to pick one and we got to go. This character's not in the show, and this, that, and the other, and okay, and you just got to go with it. So that happens too. And I always like to work off the role, or build off the different elements to make the role. So if we knew it was going to be a jet, was it a heavy jet or a sleek jet? Okay, well, that means he might be a fighter versus a swordsman, and and be more of a brawler. So he's going to be thicker here, because of those engines, and ... And I would shape the character out of the forms and the attitude that presented itself. So that's where I'll be. The sketchbook will be ready. Yeah, it is almost in its finished form. Again, I proved it yesterday. We're moving a couple items more up to the front that I like and that I know was popular on my Instagram, ArcherMonster_creative. So I moved some of the things that were more popular up to the front, dropped in the Vector Prime that was the promo image for tonight's show. So it will be ready and available at TFCon Toronto. We'll see if it'll probably be available that week overall. So just before I go off to sleep, would you ever travel to one of the conventions in England? Yeah, I went to TF Nation, good few years ago now. 2019 or 18 even. It's been a while. I love England. It's a place I've been to most in my travels because Hasbro had an office there. And it was a good excuse to go have some nights out with friends. So yeah, I love it. I'm happy to go back. Just been working on some of my own characters and hitting a wall with generating names that aren't taken. Found myself just creating gibberish to see if I end up with something I like. Yeah, we would do stuff like that too. You can definitely on Transformer names, the Roman Latin prefix suffix thing can happen. Optimus Minor, Optimus Prime, Optimus Major, Optimus, and then I used to just sit around and car parts, bulkhead, camshaft, dual exhaust, dual just anything, really, anything. And then if they cleared later or not, that again, that's an extra layer of legal stuff that's just not as fun. And sometimes you'd have fun names that you just couldn't use. But again, you guys know from Transformers, we have so many names and so many unique names that usually there's something that you can take and accentuize if you wanted to. Gibberish works too. And sometimes you get refute. Yeah, sometimes the names don't get randomly picked out of a giant bag. Sometimes that can happen. And again, it depends on how close the people who are picking those final names are to the intention of the products or thinking it through. Sometimes that stuff can happen fast, or it's often something that gets put on a younger marketer or a newer marketer. So, I don't want to say stuff can slip through the cracks, but we all have a learning curve, and if there's not communication on it, it can be a problem. Artemis Prime, yeah. I do remember people saying that there was an overabundance of something blast names. I don't know. In my era, Swerve was kind of, when in doubt, make a red car and call it Swerve. Every Redeco red thing was Swerve for a while, no matter the price point. I think you could have, had a pretty decent collection of just Swerves for a few years there. All right. Well, we got to 11:15 tonight. Thanks everybody for coming. I had a pretty good conversation. I will dig some more Supercross stuff out and see what I can find. Again, Matt, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you. I am an independent artist, so super chats go a long way to keeping the gear up to date and everything going. So it all adds. Appreciate you. And check out archermonster.com if you're into original art or want to look for the second sketchbook. And if you haven't got the first one, definitely do your best to get on that. I got a stack left before I change it up a little bit and offer it some other way. So good to hang out, everybody. Good questions, good conversation as always. Outcast, Claudio, Mikey and Louie, Coltron, definitely Matt and Dave. Nice to have you here. Ninjatron, thank you. See you Proto tomorrow on the Slag. All right, I appreciate everybody, and we will do it again next week. Email me or hit me up on Instagram, ArcherMonster_creative, if you got a topic or a character you think I should deep dive on. All right? So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.